Microarray technology, through the middle part of the last decade, was responsible for this general activity of associating genetic variations with human disease. It was called the GWAS era, genome-wide association studies. And as a result of that, there have been many thousands of publications and thousands of genetic associations of places where we vary in our genome with either the likelihood of getting diseases, or in the case of Mendelian diseases, definitive relationships between genetic variation and the fact that someone will get a particular Mendelian disease. The flagship application here is what we call non-invasive prenatal testing, or NIPT. In this case, we have the ability, through a simple blood draw from the mom, to determine whether the baby that a pregnant mother is carrying has any number of genetic diseases, Down syndrome being probably the single most important in that family. And we can do this by sequencing the entire genome of the DNA that we extract in the mom's blood and looking for extra copies of chromosomes that are contributed to that sequence through the fact that the baby's DNA is present in the mom's blood. And this replaces the invasive amniocentesis procedure, and over the course of the last 4 or 5 years has largely replaced amnio as a frontline screen. We think it's the fastest ever adopted diagnostic test. In the case of cancer, we have now many of our customers use our sequencing technology for germline analysis. For example, Myriad does this for identifying the BRCA gene to predict a woman's likelihood of getting breast or ovarian cancer. We have a wide activity in sequencing solid tumors for determining what drug to prescribe. And we just talked in our symposium just finished about Grail, which is one of our very important spin-off companies that is using deep sequencing in order to create a cancer screen for asymptomatic patients. So our view in the long run is that everyone is going to get sequenced. It's going to become part of their health record, and that will be used to manage their health care throughout their lifetime. These technologies are new, and the payer system tends to respond reasonably slowly to changes in healthcare, and it takes compilation of lots of clinical evidence to convince payers to pay for these tests. For example, now we have the ability to diagnose rare or undiagnosed disease in children incredibly effectively, but almost nobody reimburses that test today. So overcoming that hurdle is really important. There's also regulatory barriers in the US. The FDA prevents us from doing certain types of information or creating that information and returning it to consumers. And so that regulatory burden is quite high and prevents many companies from actually developing and marketing their tests at the rate that they could otherwise. And I think there's always ethical questions as well. So in the long run, as the power of this technology truly plays out, we'll have to ask ourselves the question, is it appropriate ever to do a complete genetic sequence of a baby that's yet unborn? And what do we do with that information? What's appropriate use of that information and what isn't? How do we prevent discrimination from the use of somebody's genetic information, whether that has to do with employment or whether it has to do with medical or life insurance? So a whole series of questions around the ethical use of this information in the long run.